We're back with The Brief from Diagonal Media, your one-stop shop for creating content that moves the needle for your brand, your company, and your message. Let's get started. Today I'm chatting with Peter. He's a storyboard artist. Peter, welcome to The Brief. I'm very excited to chat with you today. Tell me a little bit about what it means to be a storyboard artist and a little bit about who you are.
Okay, well, hello, my name is Peter Keahey and I am a storyboard artist. And what a storyboard artist is part of the entertainment industry in pre-production, where you plan out shots and shot flow in shows and television and movies. So if you ever watch behind the scenes features and they have like deleted scenes for mostly animated shows and you just see a handful of drawings instead of a finished product, that's the storyboard. And that happens before they do final animation so that they don't have to spend time, fully rendering something out to see if it works. That way they can knock it out ahead of time.
So you've got a lot of really impressive credits on IMDb. You got BoJack Horseman, and Central Park, Bob's Burgers. How has the experience been for you kind of navigating the industry and finding that next gig? And do you find that you get to grow and experiment as an artist with each new one that you take on?
So it depends on the project you're working on. For instance, some of the ones you named, BoJack, for instance, that was a very free-flowing type of project where it had its basic script and story structure that we worked with, but a lot of the humor from BoJack, if you watch the show, comes from the background gags and the visual jokes that just appear in the background that you don't really maybe not notice the first time. So as an artist working on that, it was fun to be able to put things like that in there, especially if you have a very pun-oriented sense of humor that I tend to. They love putting animal puns in that, so I could just throw them in the back and make suggestions and they would lovingly accept them. Other types of projects like Bob's Burgers, Central Park are more strict to what they've written, so there's less room for a visual narrative, but they offer more leeway at times in terms of how a scene is done. So when you're doing the thumbnails, the very first pass of a storyboard, you have a little bit more freedom in how the shots are going to be done in a more sitcom way of shooting like Bob's and Central do.
What is a day in the life as a storyboard artist like?
Day in the life of a storyboard artist, depending on what phase of the job you're in, is basically you wake up, you don't go to work most of the time anymore now because once the pandemic kicked off, all of animation just moved to your own home, which was kind of a good thing. I mean, it was a good thing. I'm very grateful that I got to keep working during the pandemic because most of the entertainment industry shut down as soon as the pandemic happened because you couldn't go on set, you couldn't work in large groups. But animation, my studio, for instance, there were about 2 weeks between when we decided to start closing the studio and when we could start working again. It was a very low downtime. So it kind of was like the industry that kept Hollywood going at the time because animation was barely slowed down by the pandemic. And I think in 2020, maybe 2021, I might be getting the year wrong, but 7 of the 10 top streamed films were animated because they were the only things that could still be produced with any kind of certainty. Tangent aside. So you wake up, you get on your computer, you pull up your script, you read it through to see what the scenes are. The director will usually divide up who among your team is getting what shot, because they'll often know who has better proclivities in terms of who's good at doing emotional work, who's good at doing action, who's good at doing comedy. So he'll tell you you'll get scenes 19 through 20, and then you start doing a thumbnail pass, which is just very rough. What you'll basically do is put in the background, put where the characters are and do no acting, just to make sure your shot flow is good. And then beyond that, you will then start to flesh that out and put in acting, and if you have your dialogue by then, you'll make sure that that matches which character is speaking, so that's all clear. And you just spend the whole day on a back and forth like that. If you do finish your shot before the day is over, you'll tell your director or your assistant director, they'll take a look at it, give you any notes, kick it back, and then we'll continue with the project. When a certain phase is done, like thumbnails, and then beyond that, we do rough boards and then cleans. At each end of those phases, the producers and the writers and the supervising directors will all look at the episode as a whole and do a big list of notes. Well, hopefully it's not big, but they'll do their notes and then you'll get them back and you'll have a couple weeks to do their changes before the episode is over and you move on to the next one.
A lot of what you said, like I have so many follow-up questions now.
Perfect.
Yeah, so like if somebody's trying to decide, they want to work with a storyboard artist, say they've made a film or they've written like a pitch script or, like a pilot, and they want to get a storyboard artist on board on their team, and they're going to hire them freelance. You had mentioned some things that I'm wondering, how does somebody kind of ascertain that when they're looking and seeing who's available? You had mentioned like people who have different qualities, like they're better at drawing faces or emotions or scenery, or how do you know how to find whom is good at what? And then also you'd mentioned like, hopefully they don't have too many notes. So in terms of like working with the storyboard artist, what's the ideal way to kind of have that communication and that creative collaboration with a storyboard artist when you're bringing them onto your team?
So if you're working with a storyboard artist freelance, one of the ways you can tell what somebody is good at is almost every storyboard artist will have a portfolio or a reel that you can find online to watch their samples, and they'll usually do the things that they are best at. So if you go to someone's storyboard reel and you see them doing mostly sitcom and comedy, then you know that's what they're gonna have a strong indication towards. If you see a lot of action boards, like you see someone storyboarding for Marvel shows or Ninja Turtles or something, then you know that you can work with an action boarder in that way. If you see somebody who has just a smattering from every vein of life, like there's a sitcom, here's a movie, here's some action, then you know you have a well-rounded boarder who will be able to take almost anything you can throw at them, which is kind of good and bad. It depends on how specific or what you're looking for. But in terms of how to work with them, it's important to keep in mind that storyboards take time. Like it's one of the biggest problems right now is that the schedules keep getting shorter, and the list of responsibilities that boarders have has been growing over the years in terms of how we are sort of overlapping other jobs that used to exist outside of boarding that have now just become part of storyboarding. So if you want to work with a storyboarder and have that boarder be happy, it's important to like maintain some level of boundary in terms of what you expect from them. So if you want them to storyboard like a commercial or a short film for you, what they will often expect that you want is them to just do the drawings, like interpret their script and do the shots. So like shot A looks like this, shot B looks like this, and then they will pass that back to you if you're the project lead for you to find an editor to cut them together, and your voice actors to, actually, ideally, you have dialogue before you board. It's much easier to do it that way. But if you don't, then you have your own voice actors who will record the dialogue, and you have timers who will make sure the action happens when it's supposed to. All things that have been slowly like incorporated into the storyboarding job in recent years that didn't used to be. And if you maintain that, then you won't really have a problem finding someone to work with.
What would you say is important for someone working with a storyboarding artist to understand about the process of creativity?
It does take time, and the more time you give a storyboard artist, the better the end result will be, because they'll have time to consider, like, I've done this first pass, but I don't have to turn that in. I can now break it down, think about what I did, try something different, see if that works better. But if you don't have time to iterate on one idea over and over again, the first one's never going to be the best one unless you are incredible, which happens but is rare. As long as you know that storyboarding takes time and you are willing to give that to an artist, you really won't have that much of an issue. Because even going back to what I said with a storyboard artist taking on multiple roles, a lot of artists, most of us do mind that. Some of us don't. Some of us prefer having that broad umbrella, because if you can time your animation to an audio track, you might be able to convey the animation and the movement better than if you were just drawing still frames and not being able to time them. You might be able to see where there's a stutter, where it doesn't flow correctly. And given an adequate amount of time, then it's not such a big deal for storyboard artists to take on that additional role. Number one thing to keep in mind in terms of creativity is to give an artist time, and you will get something great back.
What would you say to somebody who is interested in becoming a storyboard artist? Like, what advice would you give to them for how to get rolling?
If you're going to be a storyboard artist, it's important to study a lot of aspects of animation as a whole, Like you wouldn't just be like, I want to study what storyboarding is. You have to study how things move, how humans move specifically. You have to study how to convey emotion, how to work on timing of humor if you wanted to go in that route, how to make things dynamic, how to make things look like they have weight. There's a lot of things to think of when you're storyboarding, and aside from just like, did I get the design right? It's important that too, like another aspect is you should be able to adapt your style into whatever you're working on. Because there's a lot of artists, and it's not a bad thing, who have, a style. Like you look at their artwork and you're like, well, that was, Picasso. Oh, that was Miyazaki. If you want to work on multiple things at multiple studios, it's important to be able to be a chameleon and adapt how you draw to how that show is conveying its characters and its setting. There's a large turnover in animation, and studios are always hiring all the time. If you look on sites like, if you go on Indeed, if you just have a profile on LinkedIn, you will see postings all over the place. You can sign up for mailing lists. You can check message boards. There's always somebody hiring. So if you're looking for that first job, look more than one place and don't put all your eggs in one basket, and know that you're not locked in. You can pick a different place to be at any time if it's not working out for you. Yeah, that's important to remember if you're thinking of joining the storyboarding community, which we'd love to have you if you do.
That's such great advice. Thank you so much. What are your plans for the rest of the evening?
The rest of the evening, my plans are usually the same. I take care of my very new baby. That takes up most of my evenings.
Congratulations, that's amazing.
Thank you. They are 7 months old almost, so that's like just my whole other job at this point.
I know you're at the end of a very busy work day, so I appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. I'm always happy to talk about the industry with people if they have questions about it. I should also throw out one thing, because I feel like I will get called out if I don't. The Animation Guild, the union that governs, most artists in the industry, is in negotiation right now for better wages and better conditions and better work hours right now. So like if you are a fan of animation and you're thinking of getting into it, it's important to throw support our way if you want to. It would be very helpful. Just posting on social media, sharing posts from animation professionals that you see, because we're all talking about it, so it's not like a secret. But it's an ongoing process, and as much support as we can get is always helpful. And hopefully it leads to better conditions and we don't have to work such long hours, and become a little less stressed and create better products. So
is there any like social media hashtag or handle that you know of off the top of your head that would be good to follow?
New Deal for Animation is the most common hashtag used. You'll see it pop up on Facebook, Instagram, all over the place. If you just search for Animation Guild, Local 839 is also, that's just the guild number. Any of those terms will bring up what's happening right now in terms of negotiations, if you want to get more informed about that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for giving us a heads up about that. And
of course.
Have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you, you too.